However, the document itself and the State Board of Education's guidance for districts really provides for that local control for districts to make most every decision about the distance plan that they are going to be incorporating. When we think about what does that flexibility mean, it really means that your district will be able to make determinations about everything, including how you are going to deliver distance learning instruction, the expectations that you'll have for students related to how much time they'll spend each day engaging in distance learning. Even grades, how or if you will, as a district, how you'll approach doing any level of grading. All of that is going to be up to the local control of the district. And we know that your districts are working very hard right now to develop a plan so that they can communicate with you if they haven't already. Just keep in mind that we're all in this time of something brand new that we are trying to work through, and patience is probably the best thing we can do to support one another right now. But I promise you, we've heard from several of your district leaders, and we know they're actively working on this if they haven't already communicated that plan with you. If you have any questions related to any of sort of the infrastructure of distance learning, how will students receive instruction, what's our district game plan for what subject areas or how long students will be engaged in instruction every day, reach out to your district leaders or administration, because they're working on that plan, and I'm sure they do want to hear from you. Robin, I know that you've been a part of a couple of other meetings this morning with other grade levels. Were there other thoughts related to what districts will be deciding in their own local plan?
There wasn't a lot of talk about that yet. I think districts are still trying to make those decisions, as we're just 2.5 days in since the board meeting. So everyone was just waiting to hear, and districts are asking questions of teachers, of resources and things like that. So no definites that have been shared yet. Wonderful.
One thing we would like to share is that we understand that under distance learning, the school day will look different than the regular day. And again, you'll be working with your districts to determine what that looks like. One thing we wanted to share with you today is a quote from a science teacher from our Facebook group yesterday. And I think it may set the stage for us a little bit as we talk about what science teaching and learning looks like in this distance learning timeframe. So the quote is, or what the teacher shared in the Facebook group, is that they had an epiphany earlier that day. The teacher said, "How long have we said if only testing would go away, if only we could teach science just for the joy of learning and following our curiosities? Now we have the chance, or at least more so maybe than ever before. I'm starting to feel more optimistic about it with that thought in the back of my mind." We want to share that with you today because we are hopeful that that's the way that we can all begin to approach this time frame. We understand there's a lot of anxiety, but if we could look at it from an opportunity mindset, what can we do together? I'll remind you, every teacher, every science teacher in the state is in this situation, and we're having to find ways to connect in ways that we never have before. So let's leverage this community and let's work together, and let's provide some great opportunities for students for at-home learning. And when we meet challenges, let's work together to overcome those. And I think that's the biggest message we want to share with everyone today as we continue along in our meeting. So one support system we believe might be helpful to science teachers in the state is this document that we've created titled Distance Learning Guidance for Science. I apologize, I had the wrong one up. Let me get to the right one here. It currently says 6 through 12, but we believe it's pretty applicable, especially to our 4th and 5th grade teachers as well. In our meeting agenda, we'll share another document that is grade level specific for pre-KK, 1-2, and 3-5 guidance, if you are a teacher who's teaching one of those grade level areas. And I'm sure our OSDE team will help add that to our agenda document, because I believe I forgot to earlier. When you take a look at this document, one of the first things you're going to see is an area titled Questions to Consider While Planning for Continued Learning. So these are questions that we believe are positive for every science teacher to ask themselves as they're beginning to plan for distance learning for students. So the first consideration is, what are responsible goals for student learning in your context? And these are a few things to think about. One thing you'll notice is there's a sample idea here, or a sample schedule for what science learning could look like in your local context for distance learning. It may be that 6 through 12 science happens 40 to 60 minutes 2 times a week. Again, the final determination about how much time will be spent on a particular subject area will be up to your district and the plan they develop. This is just an example of what could happen. Again, it doesn't look like a normal day. It's not 5 days a week for 55 minutes. It may look different, and that's something you'll want to work with your district to figure out what those parameters are. The rest of the questions here under considerations really fall into the categories of thinking about how you're going to introduce a topic in science or an investigation in science, and then how you're going to have students collect data or information to try to maybe explain something they're noticing with the investigation you're having them do. The questions also prompt you to think about how you might have students engaged in discussions, both virtually or not, and ways that students can document their thinking so you can see what progress in learning that they're having. So there are a lot of examples for how you can do these various ways of thinking about instruction in 2 through 5 in this document. They're all simply suggestions. None of these suggestions are a mandate from the State Department, or even us saying to you that you have to do these things. They're just ideas that we've pulled together with the support of our SDE team, as well as other science educators in the state. So we hope that in this document, those prompts are helpful as you begin to plan for distance learning. There are a few other prompts to think about here. And then we wanted to point out our special education office and our English language learner offices are developing guidance in a similar fashion to these documents that are specific to supporting diverse populations. Those documents are not on the web pages yet, but they should be there a little later today. We'd also like to encourage you to think about universal design as a way to structure your activities to ensure that the needs of all students are met. If universal design is new to you, there's a link here with more information about what universal design is. We're going to talk about practical advice here in just a little bit, so I'm going to scroll past that for a moment. But you'll also see some example activities located in this document. There are a few example activities from all grade levels, but I'll go down to middle school and high school, just so you can get a sense of some sample activities that you could consider doing with students for distance learning or at-home learning at this time. And again, as I mentioned the quote earlier from our teacher on the Facebook group, you'll see that maybe a lot of these ideas or opportunities are the things that maybe you've wanted to do with students for a long time and felt that for whatever reason you couldn't. Ways of engaging students in investigating the world around them and investigating things that they're interested in. Sorry about that. I'm going to go back to our document. You'll also notice on this document that we're asking teachers if they have ideas to share those in our survey collection database so that we can then update this example activity document for teachers. Again, this document provides a few more examples of activities that you might have students do. And here you'll see examples for how you can then ask students to record their thinking or share their thinking with you as a teacher or with their peers. You're also going to see in this document a link to instructional resources. There are a few instructional resources listed on the document, but you'll find a whole slew of other instructional resources through that link on the document. Just a couple of resources that were shared in the newsletter yesterday and on the Facebook group that I'll reiterate here. If you haven't checked out NSTA's Daily Dues, it's a wonderful resource right now. It really is a nice short task for elementary and secondary that students could do in investigations at home. And these daily dues from NSTA really walk you through as a teacher how to set this up for students and for families to do at home. Additionally, I'll point you to a series of documents that have been created that speak specifically to families and students. We understand that families and students can be a little fearful about doing science for whatever reason. And these documents can, I think, really put the minds of students and families at ease a little bit more. The documents have been translated in a variety of languages. You'll see English and Spanish located on the document. But then you'll also see additional translations here in this link. The OSDE team has pulled together middle school and high school additional instructional resources that you might find valuable. And there's a little information for each resource that's shared about what it is and how you might think about using it. For example, if you were going to introduce to students a particular topic, let's say it's a topic about weather, you might find a video in one of the instructional resources as a way for you to have students listen to the video or watch the video and then engage in the task that you're going to have them do. Again, if we scroll through the document, and I apologize if the driving of the document is making anyone sick, there are also a few technology resources that have been compiled. These technology resources help you think about, there are tutorials for things like Zoom. There are instructions for developing a Google Classroom if you choose to really delve into the digital side of supporting students with distance learning. And then we're always going to encourage you to stay connected, because as we learn and grow together, we're going to be sharing the wonderful ideas and resources that teachers in the state are developing. So I'm going to pause there and see from our OSDE group, are there any questions in the chat box related to the document, the guidance document?
Tiffany, one of the questions has to do with when they select activities, should they be aligned to the standards they need to teach for the remainder of the year, or should they be review standards? So what is our guidance on that?
That's a great question. Remember, the State Board of Education is giving full flexibility to districts for making determinations even about that. So you'll want to work with your district to see what their plan is. But from the State Department's point of view, we're not asking you to adhere to a specific set of standards in the remaining weeks of instruction. We want you to work with your district to think about what's best for your students. It could be that much of the time is spent around enrichment or review of existing material that's covered. One thing to note is that many of you have probably seen the state testing has been removed for this year. So these students who may have been gearing up to take an 8th grade science test or their high school science test would not be doing that this year. So really the determination is up to you about the instruction that you want to provide and whether or not you want to focus on a specific set of standards, or maybe you want to focus on topics and emphasize, let's say, science and engineering practices and cross-cutting concepts. That's really up to you, depending on the guidance of your district. And we would encourage you to always adhere to the guidance of your district first, and then begin to make your plan for instruction after that. I hope that's helpful. One thing we would love to have you do in the chat box right now is just, as you've had a chance to review the document, we would love to hear what about the document seems valuable to you, and provide an opportunity for other teachers on the call today to see some of your thoughts. So if we could just take 1 or 2 minutes and have everyone that is able to respond to that question. How might this document be valuable to you as a teacher in the next steps you're going to take to plan distance learning?
Tiffany, someone has asked the question. We are not allowed to do new material, and they put it in a question, only review.
The decision about the material you'll cover is, So again, some districts may choose to focus on a set of standards. Some districts may choose to focus on enrichment and review. That is going to be up to your local district's plan to determine that. I do see a few questions in the chat box about some folks feeling that their materials have to be printed for students. We'll talk about this a little bit more as we go along in the meeting. But one thing, again, I would share with you is that you want to work with your local district to determine the method by which you'll disseminate instruction to students or any materials. Keeping in mind that we want to ensure safety first, but your district will be working to come up with a plan to guide you through that those recommendations for how you'll deliver instruction to students.
Tiffany, there was a great question in here about when can people expect to hear from their district and the guidance that's coming out from them.
So one thing to know is the State Department of Education's guidance to district leaders should be out later today. We believe that many administrators have been working with groups in their district to develop their plans, and some of them have disseminated that with teachers in their district. Others may be waiting on this guidance from the OSDE to make some final determinations, but my guess is, in listening to administrators from around the state, the teachers should be contacted very soon so you can begin to plan next week to offer the distance learning instruction starting April 6th.
Tiffany, one of the questions dealt with wondering about the districts that have absence of internet.
Yes, and so one of the partnerships that the Oklahoma State Department of Education is engaged in right now is a partnership with OETA. There's a webinar today at 4 o'clock. We'll make sure and post it. I think it's posted. I don't know if it's posted in the Facebook group, but it'll also be Facebook Live. In that partnership, what we are working on is OETA is providing several channels of programming from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. in the afternoon that school districts can connect to for distance learning opportunities for students who may not have access to technology and the internet. We think that's a pretty promising option for districts who know that their students maybe don't have that access. One thing I will tell you is districts around the state have already begun to survey their students and families to get a better idea about the access or connectivity issues that they may have, what they're able to do and what they're not able to do. And that survey information is informing the district plans. Again, I think once your district administration and leadership communicates with you that district plan, there will be some nice guidance for you about specifically how you can take steps to support students with or without technology. We did think that it would be a nice idea to think about together the differentiation aspect. So even if you think about the students you have in your classrooms right now, some of them may have access to technology, some may have little access to technology, and some may have no access to technology. So it becomes a space where we as teachers have to think about differentiation of our instruction for distance learning. So here on our meeting document in the agenda, under the 5th agenda item, it says, how might I adjust distance learning instruction and tasks based on students' access to technology? So we've created sort of 3 categories that you might think about when you are trying to determine the way that you might differentiate instruction. So do you have all students that have no technology? Do you have some students that have no technology? And then you'll have to think about, as an educator, strategies specifically geared to those students. Medium to low technology strategies might be for teachers who have some students that have access, or it could also mean that your students have access, but the access they have is not fast internet. So it might make it challenging for them to stream something live or to even participate in a Zoom call like we are right now. Many of the platforms that are available, if you want to connect to students in this way, do allow for students to call in, just as many of you did today. So there are a variety of ways to think about how you might connect with students. But these three categories might help you think about where your students are at. Do they have no tech, medium or low tech, or high tech? And then we've just provided one example here. If I'm a middle school teacher and I've got a task I want to give students during this time frame to engage them in an investigation, maybe for the investigation I want them to develop an explanation for why the grass might turn brown during drier months and why grass needs to be mowed after it has rained for several days. Certainly applicable to what we've been dealing with in the last week. And so let's say I have 150 students across all my classes. Let's just say that number. Some of my students I know are going to have no or limited technology. Others will have access to high technology. So maybe there are some ways I can begin to differentiate the ways in which they're interacting with this project or task I'm asking them to do. Now, these are just a few ideas. We know teachers on the call have much better ideas than this, but this will give you a sense that maybe you could have some students interacting in some ways and others interacting in other ways. Okay, sorry, I got distracted by the text, the chat, but that's not for me. So I'm going to pause there and see if there are any other questions that we might respond to from our group. And then I'm going to hand it over to Susan to engage us in a little bit of sharing of ideas.
Tiffany, question about the 11th grade assessment and the students in 9th and 10th grade and the standards that they're missing right now. And another question was just about testing in the next 2 years with the kids missing content from this year.
Yeah, so again, there are a lot of things that I think we're going to be working through in the next couple of months and even into next year. We've already heard some districts who have, let's say, they have a few more concepts that they want to get through this year with students. They may be focusing on that with the remainder of their time. Others have chosen maybe to focus on enrichment and review, and then next year address how to supplement learning for students who may have missed out on a few concepts. I think as the weeks go by, we're going to hear from many districts different ways in which they're thinking about addressing some of these challenges. And one of the things we're committed to at OSDE is sharing a lot of those ideas because we know that districts and teachers, you are going to have the solutions for your local context and your situation. Susan, do you want to engage us in a little bit of sharing of ideas?
Yeah, just like our students, whenever we have them in class and they engage with each other, they learn best and they have new ideas. We are the same way. And we know that when you are providing examples and you're collaborating with each other, then we have a lot more resources and we're able to generate new ideas. So we have provided links here for you to, in each grade level. So some of you may be on here that know some elementary teachers or middle school teachers. We provided them those links in their virtual meetings, but if they weren't able to attend, this is these are links that if you would, we would love to hear your ideas, how your students are engaging at home. We have ideas for no technology. We would love to get, especially the high school. I think that's the one that sometimes are more difficult to get. So if a lot of you high school teachers would share your ideas on no technology and then the medium and low technology. Tiffany went over examples for all of those. And then finally, the ones that are using high technology. We would love for you guys to be able to collaborate on that and share ideas. And we will be meeting up again, which we're going to cover in just a minute. We will try to organize some of those and maybe use those in some of our breakout rooms in our future meetings. Also, Tiffany covered that we have guidance documents for special education and EL. Those links take you to the State Department's website, and you will find guidance on all things related to those. There's a fact and question link whenever you click on these, there's a fact and question link on the State Department website that can address a lot of questions that you might be having as far as IEP meetings and things like that. So please do not hesitate to make sure that you utilize those links for those students as well.
Right. And so we have a little time on the call today. We would love for you to pick one of the areas, elementary, middle school, or high school. And we're just going to take a few minutes, maybe 4 or 5 minutes. And we want for each of you on the call, see, right now we have over 200 people on the call. And if you could share 1 or 2 ideas with the group in these documents, I'll click into middle school, for example, no technology. You're able to click into the document and write an idea of what you might have students do for instruction that leverages no technology and how you might do that. Or maybe you're high school level and you know your students have quite a bit of access to technology. If you'll go into the high school high technology document and add a few ideas or suggestions. So we're going to take a few minutes and pause on the call to give everyone a chance to answer or to share some of those ideas. Because again, we know that your ideas are better than ours, and the more ideas we have, the more ideas that teachers on the call will have. So take just a few minutes, and if everyone would commit to sharing 1 idea on the documents, we would love that. We're just now seeing some folks get into some of the documents. Keep adding your ideas. Everything that you have that you've seen on the webinar or on the Zoom call today, on the virtual call today, will be accessible to you through the meeting agenda link that was shared today. So you will always have access to it. All right, we're seeing a lot of great ideas added to the boards. We'd encourage you to keep adding those ideas. I'm going to jump over here. Let's see if high school medium tech has, oh yeah, we have a few things here. As you come back to this document after the call, for any of you that have placed ideas in the documents, if you also have a great link to showcase how someone might use a piece of technology, I noticed one of the high school medium or low tech ideas is mini gaming formats such as PS3 can log in to online formats. If you've got a quick link to how to for folks, that would be great. We see a few questions. The boards will be added as a link to the guidance document, but they will also stay linked on this meeting agenda, which will also be available to you anytime after this call. We will not shut off access to the meeting agenda. So you really have two documents you want to keep up with. One is the meeting agenda for today that's on the screen, and the other is the science distance learning document. So certainly keep hold of those. There will be a recording of the call today that will be shared through the science newsletter and the Facebook group. But what I will say is we've had several of these in different disciplines and content areas today, and it does take a little while to get the videos formatted in a way where we can share them easily. So it may take us a little while to get those to you. It will not be immediately after this call. We're seeing all kinds of great ideas. We're going to continue to move along in our call with you today. And Donna's going to talk to us a little bit about a little practical advice for us as teachers navigating this new and uncharted territory and things that we want to keep in mind to just give ourselves a break and grace through this time period. So Donna, you want to share a few of your thoughts and maybe share with us a little bit of your background experience?
Well, I just wanted to say these are unprecedented times, so I don't think anybody knows what to expect. And I think that as educators, we need to give ourselves grace. It's kind of like being a parent for the first time when you feel like you're not totally equipped for it, but the baby doesn't know any different. And that's the way it's going to be with our students. So I think that if you will give yourself some grace and let yourself work through this, you'll feel better about it. And they don't have any expectations of what you are or aren't going to do. I also, one of the first things they mentioned there is if you don't have successes, give yourself permission to move on. And I know behind the scenes, Tiffany makes it look really orchestrated, but behind the scenes, we were having to give our own selves a lot of grace trying to learn a new platform to communicate in Microsoft Teams. And sometimes things didn't work and we'd ask other people and we just had to move on because we were spending too much time trying to fix it. Also, I think that you need to identify, if you are working with students, is identify some of the personal notes in it. I've seen some really great anecdotal things from teachers that start with just sending out a board that students can post a picture that describes how they're feeling each day. And they don't have to identify, but the teacher can talk about it for those that have internet access and are doing that. But as well as many of us have children with us at home, grown children, small children, so we're having to navigate that as well, and trying to find personal space and enough computers to work on. One of the things that has been suggested to us is exercise or meditate, and we've got some links that some people have put together that can assist with that. And with YouTube video, you certainly can reach out and find those, or just get outdoors and get a breath of fresh air. Again, take a break when you need it. I know that all of us being science teachers tend to be workaholics, but sometimes it's time to get up and walk away for a few minutes and come back, and you'll find out that your thinking has clarified a little bit and you can come up with ideas. And the last one is probably the best one, which is to laugh heartily at least once a day. And I know even at the OSDE, we've had some people that have posted some things that are funny that make you realize, you know, life is still going on around us, even in this stressful time. So again, just give yourself some grace. Nobody knows what this looks like. We're pioneering a whole new trail.
We certainly are, Donna, and thank you for the wise words of wisdom there. I think a couple of other things that I'll just share. One thing that Superintendent Hoffmeister said at the board meeting this week that really resonated with me was that over the next few weeks, starting April 6th, and many of you have already connected with your students, but really see this time as an opportunity to provide some level of structure for students, whatever that looks like for what your district is calling for in their plan, but mostly provide connectivity to students. There was a teacher who shared with me personally the other day that she held a virtual call with her students. Some of them phoned in, some of them used video chat like we are now. And one of the things that I had the opportunity to listen into her classroom, her virtual classroom for, is she began by setting the stage for her students about what the expectations would be. She was very clear about that, but she also spent some time recognizing that they probably had some stress of their own in their lives and were feeling uncertain about a lot of things. And she wanted to make clear to her students, and she did make clear from the very beginning, that one of the things she hoped that they would do is to be very open and honest with her if something that she may be asking them to do, they didn't have the resources to complete, and they didn't feel like they had the support to complete. She wanted them to know that if at all they felt that way, that this was the time, maybe more than any other time, to be open and honest so that she could work with them and support them with whatever support they needed. She wanted to remind them, and she did, that they were not alone in this, that she was going to be there to help them. And she encouraged them that they would be provided multiple opportunities to connect with their peers, who many of them were desperately missing. So whether it was by telling them, this was an English teacher, whether telling them that an article she was going to ask them to read, she wanted them to pair up that week with one other person and get on the phone and talk about that article. She wasn't going to be taking an assessment on that, but she wanted them to pair up and talk through that article. So I thought those were really great things to think about. And I would encourage you at this time, lean on your teacher friends. Think back to our days of student teaching when we had a chance to watch other teachers and to collaborate with them and learn from them. Reach out to your fellow teachers and see how they're doing some of them. Ask them if you can attend one of their meetings or see some of the communication formats that they're using to connect with their students. We're seeing a lot more ideas in the chat room. We will take as many of the comments that are in the chat room as we can and share those in some of the documents you have access to today. We also just wanted to say that we think it's a good idea for us to get together. And so every week, Fridays at 3 o'clock, and keep in mind at the OSDE, we have to spread out all of our Zoom calls. So Friday may not sound like the ideal time at 3 o'clock, but it very well could be the best time for us to get together and just decompress and reflect on the week. But every week, all the way through March 30th, we will be hosting a webinar like this, a virtual meetup for science teachers across the state. We at OSDE will provide some resources that we're hearing from across the state, but we will also likely provide opportunities for you to help other teachers troubleshoot during this time. If you haven't already joined the OKSci Facebook groups, there's a link on the agenda today, as well as in the distance guidance document, where you can link to those groups and sign up. Teachers around the state are supporting one another, sharing ideas in those spaces. I'm sorry, Teresa Randall, I did mean April 30th, not March 30th. We'll continue to hold these meetings through April 30th, and maybe a little longer, but right now we have them scheduled through April 30th. Thank you so much for catching that. If there are other questions that you have that we haven't answered today, knowing that it's a little hard to keep track in the chat box, if you have specific questions, we have a question board set up, and we'll be monitoring this question board, and we will add answers as we have them. So you can always go back to this question board and see those answers. This will be a document that is linked in our agenda document every week for our virtual meetups. So we're going to pause now, and either you can add questions to the question board or you can add them to the chat. Yes, the virtual meetups will be at 3 p.m. each Friday. And one thing I do want to show you very quickly, in the distance guidance document for science, if you scroll all the way down to the end of the page, the end of the document, I'm sorry, you will see that the virtual meetup is located there with all of the Zoom information. So you don't have to worry about whether or not you saw the science newsletter or saw the meeting posted on Facebook. It's in the document, and it will be this meeting link at this time every Friday, all the way through April 30th and maybe a little beyond. You can certainly share this document with your school staff.
Tiffany, is there any way that you could scroll back up to where you had the science resources? A couple people had asked about technology resources. So if you just scroll down, if you could click on that link, they were wondering like how we recorded this today and different things. So we do have technology tools and recommendations there of things that people have told us work well. So I just wanted to mention that for those of you that were asking.
Thank you so much, Donna. Appreciate that reminder. Again, I will just share with you that this agenda document and the science distance learning document are two really valuable documents for you right now. Everything that we link to today is here in these two documents. Another thing we will do is after the call today, we'll send out a science newsletter where the agenda and the distance learning document will be linked. So it will be shared with other teachers that weren't able to make the call today, but you'll certainly have access to it as well. We'll also share both of these documents in the Facebook group. What other questions might you have or other suggestions that you might have for other teachers? Please add those to the chat. And since we do have a little bit of time left, we would love to hear from you. What about today's meeting, the resources you've seen? What about that in particular do you find most valuable? And are there any other things that you think would be helpful for us to work on in the coming week to prepare for our next virtual call with you all next week? And maybe OSDE staff will have to figure out if we can do this. Are people able to virtually raise their hand and we can unmute them if they would like to talk? That's a great question that I see in the chat. Some people are asking, how do we get connected to the science newsletter? So I'm going to scroll down in the distance learning document. In the space where it says stay connected, you'll see there's a link for you to sign up for the science newsletter.
Tiffany, they have the ability to unmute now if they would like to.
Yes. Do we have anyone who would like to share any thoughts about the value of what's been provided so far or what else is needed to support teachers right now? We'll try to have one person unmute and we'll kind of see how this goes. We're playing it by ear as well. Anyone that would like to share verbally their thoughts?
Hey, Tiffany.
Yes.
This goes out to the whole group. Are there any specific STEM resources, websites? I have a middle school teacher who has asked me to help him with STEM stuff for the rest of the year.
So this person is thinking about middle school integrated STEM. Is that what you mean? Like science, technology, engineering, and mathematics together?
Right. He teaches, he's in Marietta, and he teaches 7th and 8th grade STEM classes. That's all he teaches. So he's needing some things that students can do from home that are STEM. but
So
I wasn't aware of any like specific websites or things like that.
I would say that many of the resources that we've shared today with the science group would be applicable. There are several of the suggested activities that really pull in technology and science in particular, or engineering and science.
Okay.
And
He asked
there are people
specifically for
sharing.
engineering.
And there are people sharing in the chat.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Anyone else that would like to either share their thoughts? I did see one comment in the chat asking specifically maybe for a guidance document for those teachers and how they deal with supporting students with no technology, so we can look into that. Any other thoughts about today's call or what you would like to see moving forward? Because this opportunity is really for us as a community, and we want to make sure that it's going in the direction that you want it to go.
Hey, Tiffany, this is Michelle Ron. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, I was just noticing in the chat that a lot of people were sharing ideas and different formats that they're using. I think it would be phenomenal if any of us does come up with an activity that we either videotape to share it with our students, or, you know, just a place to share that with everyone. I know we could do that on the Facebook side page, but I don't know if that's something we would want to share in this virtual meeting next week.
Yeah, I think we can have a space collecting those things on our call next week so people can access those. So let me just reframe what you said, Michelle, make sure I hear it correctly. If a teacher is using a particular application or something and they videotape themselves walking through it and showing other teachers how to do it, would we have a space that could house that? Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, that, and also even if one of us comes up with a really good lesson that we think is working, I know it would take technology, but if there was something that we as science teachers came up with to share it out with other teachers to see or use if they wanted to.
Yeah, so I think, again, we can look at collecting some of that next week on the call. You can also add it to some of the ideas, the collaboration spaces that we shared on the agenda today, as well as the Facebook group. I think that's a great idea. Maybe we can provide a space for that next week. I did see, thank you so much, Michelle. I did see several questions asking about the science standards, so I'll try to address that right now. As many of you know, the science standards were approved by the State Board of Education, the revised standards for 2020. And they were approved by the State Board, as I mentioned, on the 27th of February. Soon after, they were submitted to the legislature. As you can imagine, those set of rules, and that's what the science standards fall under, our legislative rules, are with other rules right now that are still remaining in the legislature. We are uncertain at this point what the next steps will be. As you can imagine, the legislature is focusing on a few other things right now, but we will continue to keep you updated in the weeks to come as we have these calls. So all of that to say, I don't really have an answer right now, and we're just kind of waiting and letting a few other pressing things come through the legislature right now. Any other thoughts? All right, well, we have sure enjoyed our time with you today. I think I could speak for us all when I say that it does our spirit good to see you all, to talk to you. I personally have been in my house now for, I think, 11 days. So it's been really, really good, maybe a few more than that, 11 days to see everyone. And again, we just want to be here for you all and be as useful as we possibly can. We are all working remotely, as Donna said, as well. And doing so for the last several days, I just want to reiterate to you, please give yourself grace and take time, take those breaks, go for a walk in the middle of the day. It's really the best thing you can do for self-preservation at this time. You have access to Donna, myself, and Susan, to our contact information. please don't hesitate to reach out to us. If you're facing a struggle, if you are unsure about something, we are here to help in whatever way we can. And we'll continue to have these meetings and come together and really share ideas and ways that we can leverage what may be an opportunity to do some great work with our students. We're going to say on the call for anyone who still has questions, but for those that do not, you're welcome to leave the chat space and the Zoom today as we close up our meeting. We're just going to stick on for a few more minutes to see if there are any questions that maybe people were a little nervous to ask of the larger group. So I see a question about do the restrictions prevent schools from having a pickup day each week for materials? Again, the district level guidance should be coming out from OSDE fairly soon today, but your district will have some guidance as to the CDC recommendations for interacting with students or teachers interacting with one another at this time. So work with your school district to determine what is the best and safest way for you to do that if the district so chooses. Again, following those safety guidelines that will be in that district guidance coming out from OSDE later today. Will there be a space to share ideas for pre-K3? That's a great question, Nicole. We did not mean to be exclusive. There were a couple of other calls today for pre-K, K, 1, 2, and 3, 5. For our next call, we'll devote some space just for pre-K 3.
During those meetings, we address science as well.
Yes.
This morning.
Any other questions?
Tiffany, they want to know how you got your background.
Well, I just learned moments before the call, but if you are still in Zoom, you can go to where it says stop video and the down arrow. Don't click on stop video, but the down arrow. Actually, I might be able to show everyone if I can get this. Can you see here where it says stop video? The down arrow, it says choose virtual background, and you can choose all sorts of different things. Or Donna added her own picture.
So right above the pictures is the plus sign. You can click the plus and it'll pull a picture in that you want.
I do prefer thinking about this as my background right now, though. How do you gain access to the Google Doc on the screen? I got on here late. Okay, we're going to put that in the chat box for you. Would it be helpful for those of you that are still on the line if next week, if we walked through a few helpful tips for Zoom in general? We can add that to the list for next week. Lots of yeses, okay. All right. Yes, how you show your screen. I can show you that very quickly for everyone. So that same, let's see, this same bar menu that you have that comes up, as long as you are, I think it can be anyone on the call if you have the settings set up right. Right now, I would have to stop sharing my screen, but I would go to that same menu and there is an option down at the bottom. So you should see in your bar options, mute, stop video, invite, and share screen should be an option. And when you click on share screen, you can then choose to share your screen. New share comes up when your screen's sharing, and it allows you to pick a different desktop to showcase. All right, folks, thank you again so much. We appreciate seeing you. Please reach out if you need any help, and please be safe out there.